So Troy is closer. Troy at 100 is closer to Ole Miss at 22. Then Ole Miss at 22 is to Texas at 1. What is up, everybody? It is Jake with Master of Football back at it again. Happy Tuesday. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to be up to date on all things college football, pro football, Madden, EA, college football, the NFL draft, anything related to American football, hit that red subscribe button. You'll not be disappointed. Also hit the like button as well. Like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. I appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get into the video. There's a concept in history, and it's one thing where Karl Marx came out and he said that, social decay would necessitate revolution. In actuality, history has shown the opposite of that, where actually there's innovation and growth in terms of development of certain things and certain, utilities and innovation like that. That's what causes revolution. I use this as an example. Industrialization played a major role in World War I. New military machinery could be produced at a much larger scale and at a much faster rate than before. Along with innovative technology, this led to one of the most devastating wars in human history. So we see the fact that World War I, and in reality, World War I and World War II were both basically just the same war with a little bit of a gap in between them. But basically what happened there was, it turns out that major conflicts happened because of technological revolution. I think we're seeing that in college football right now. Jack Sporback says that because he thinks that the Power Five and the rest of everybody else are going to break off. Here we are on SI.com. Notre Dame AD says NCAA could break apart without stronger NIL guidelines. Without resolutions to name, image, and likeness from itself, Congress, and professional sports, the NCAA is in jeopardy of eventually breaking apart, says Notre Dame Athletic Director Jack Sporbrick. And again, like I said before, the innovation here is NIL. Now, do I think the innovation, really it's not an innovation in this instance, but it is a new inclusion into college athletics that wasn't there before, and it's changing a lot of things here. Let's continue on. In an op-ed in the New York Times, as well as an interview with Sports Illustrated, Swarbrick painted a stark picture of the future of college athletics if NIL continues to evolve without governance and college athletes are deemed employees, something he expects to happen in the coming months. College athletics is in crisis, he says right here with President John L. Jenkins, they wrote in the Times. Despite many of his colleagues petitioning for significant congressional intervention, Swarbrick and Jenkins called for only limited federal legislation. They say Congress should rule that college athletes are not employees, preempt differing state NIL laws, and allow college athletics to create NIL rules for the sake of competitive equity. They also believe the NFL should create a minor league for young players, and that the NBA should eliminate the one-and-done rule. And I think you're also seeing that second to last point there. The NFL is creating a minor league. You see the XFL, the UFSFL, the AAF. There's so many of these that were popping up. I think what they're trying to do is get bought out by the NFL to have their own kind of minor league there, or at least a something like that in the NFL, because right now the only minor league is college athletics. I mean, maybe the Arena League if it can actually remain solvent. And the NBA should eliminate its one-and-done rule. And again, I don't really understand the concept behind that. I think what they're trying to do there is basically create a better distinction, more rules for allowing, people to freely exchange their labor. And again, I think that's the most important thing here. I'm a free market kind of guy. I think the free market will figure this out. But man, it just seems like there's this weird intersection with public universities and laws and Congress and people who aren't willing to, step up into the game. There's a whole bunch of big mess here, and it's because they just kind of had bad leadership here. And we'll get into that here in a second. Swarbrick and Jenkins also write that the NCAA and its member schools should establish more stringent rules to police NIL endeavors. Without such legislation and enforcement, Swarbrick suggests to SI that the years-long splintering of the association will reach extremes, with rich, like-minded college programs breaking away. Hint, hint, wink, wink, Texas, Oklahoma, USC, UCLA. I'm just saying. Continuing on. If we can't start to get ourselves to where we can make rational decisions like those and enforce them, the future will be more than one athletic association. I can tell you that. We've got to get our act together as college athletics and do things we can do. We sort of keep implying we can't address name, image, and likeness. Of course we can. We can do it in ways without requiring reporting on transactions, requiring that there be transactions. We have to take that on as opposed to looking to others to fix it for us. And again, that's the reason why he's saying there is that we need to police this ourselves. We can't kick the can to Congress right now, which is in a very, very weird political realignment. And there's that the Democrats won't do anything. If Republicans can win off of it, Republicans will do the same thing with Democrats. It's just, if you expect them to solve your problems, you're in a bad spot there. In a view shared by many within the industry, Swarbrick expressed his intention on protecting the century-old educational mission of college athletics, which at its highest level is drifting towards a professional model where boosters and booster-led collectives are distributing salaries to players under the guise of NIL. The evolution of NIL has created an unregulated free agency and false market where college athletics are signing 5, 6, and even 7-figure contracts to play for certain schools, administrators say. There are also instances, I'll add on to that, where certain players, it'll be like, what's the NIL with this school? $10,000 a month. What's with this one? 15. I want the 15. And that's how they're making their decisions. I do, and again, I want to make sure I come back to this because I do think that it's short-sighted to assume that everything's going to be taken care of just with that. That's how it's going to rule the roost. But we'll get into that here in a second. One of the most respected in his field, Swarbrick, a former attorney, outlined a host of solutions to repair what he says is a broken system that threatens the competitive equity of college sports. That starts with NCAA creating NIL policies as opposed to the current guidelines and enforcing those policies. I think that a big point here is that one right there, actually enforcing them. Athletes should be required to report NIL transactions to the school, he says, and it should be the school's obligation to ensure that any transaction between an athlete recruit and a booster is in fact a transaction in which the athlete contributes NIL value and the compensation reflects reasonable market value. Now, I don't mind that, but I do think that the cool thing about the market is that it's called the invisible hand of the market. A lot of people say, oh, it doesn't exist. Shut your mouth. You know it exists. I'm saying that is going to eventually take care of it. I have one really good team I'm going to bring up as an example later on in this video. Among Swarbrick and Jenkins' other suggestions in the op-ed, the NCAA should, 1, establish a national class miss policy that limits each team's travel schedule to avoid missing too many classes. USC, UCLA to the Big Ten. I'm just saying, I wonder why he's trying to address that. Number 2, create a national medical trust for those injured while playing in college sports. I think that's a great idea. I'm 100% down for that. And 3, honor scholarships for athletes who wish to return to school to complete their degree. We got into an issue there when it was like, is this a 4-year degree or a 4-year scholarship? Is this a 1 year that's renewed every year? There's a couple complications with that. Swarbrick tells SI these rules will not solve the entire problem, but are a start to regulating an unwieldy system of blatant recruiting inducements. People were paying under the table for as long as I've been around. Now it's the same payment, but they're calling it NIL. We're not going to stop it. It's not going to go all the way, but we've got to get out of this position where the vast majority of the transactions occurring are not what they are being characterized as. And let's be honest, it's basically, oh yeah, it's NIL. Anyone would like this? Please come play for us. Boom, tons of cash. Educational institutions ought to be embarrassed to be part of it. We're going to conduct a fraud here. While some school collectives are disbursing millions to their athletic teams, most notably football and basketball players, other programs don't even have deep enough donor reserves or are choosing not to take part in what's become a bidding war for talent. NIL spending is creating division among schools, Swarbrick says, a divide that could ultimately lead to a breakaway. A breakaway of the Power 5 programs, or a portion of them, has been a long-discussed possibility that has gathered momentum in this NIL era. Swelling with resources and deeper donor pockets, the Big Ten and SEC have separated themselves from much of college football. A Big Ten with USC and UCLA and an SEC with Oklahoma and Texas collectively have arguably the 15 of the top 20 brands in the sport, most of them towering financially over other programs in the FBS. And we continue on here with it says, in speaking with SI earlier this month, new NCAA president Charlie Baker acknowledged that the Power 5 is, quote, a completely different business model from the rest of the NCAA, and he believes the two can work under the same umbrella. I think there's a way to create a model that most of the work the NCAA does can support both. Swarbrick has been encouraged by Baker and believes he'll make necessary changes within the association. Baker, a former 2-term Massachusetts governor, replaces Mark Emmert, who for years led an organization that campaigned against athlete compensation. The organization fought in court to keep its amateurism model, only to see it fail time and again. And I want to make sure I include this here just to put this into perspective here, because so this right here is 2019 football values. Also, this chart doesn't really work. Every time you sort it, it doesn't sort it exactly according to revenues. I mean, it's kind of goofy, but roughly gives you an understanding about who the top ranked teams are and so on. So we have 2017, 18, and 19. I wasn't able to get the updated one with as many teams as this has. But it's very interesting to see here. I mean, Texas up here is $160 million, Ohio State 136, Alabama 140. This is insane amounts of money. This is where it gets crazy. If I come all the way down here to the bottom of the screen, So Troy's got $13 million in evaluation in 2019. We come up here to 22 to Mississippi, 78 million, and then we come up to Texas at 163. So Troy is closer. Troy at 100 is closer to Ole Miss at 22. Then Ole Miss at 22 is to Texas at 1. That is the discrepancy between not only the bottom of the NCAA and the middle of the NCAA, but the top third of the NCAA is head and shoulders far above everybody else. And realistically, the top half of that is most of it. Because you see, we got triple digits down here with Penn State, Texas A&M, Florida, Tennessee, LSU. They're worth so much more. We scroll down a little bit here to the 30s. Texas Tech 61, Minnesota 73. Florida State 27 has $94 million in valuation. But I mean, still at the same time, this is just the top is so much farther ahead of the middle and even the top quarter. It's just it's astounding how much more money they get than them. Now, I know we've been talking about this for some time. Ultimately, I think that this is going to be going away because there's the several things that are going to happen here. Now, there's one that I want to have happen, but there's several things here that are happening already that we're starting to see kind of this situation be taken care of. I think a big one there was Mark Emmert leaving. Okay, him getting out of there because I think he was just in a stale situation. He really didn't want to do anything. I also think that they're actually starting to enforce some rules now. So the transfer portal and NIL aren't exactly connected to each other. However, they are strongly connected to each other. It sounds like the NCAA transfer rules, players entering a portal for a second time subject to stricter eligibility waivers. They are actually starting to kind of, police these situations. I bet they will do with NIL. It might take a little bit longer, but they're starting to do it with the transfer portal. We come over here to this tweet from Brandon Marcello, and it basically says right here, each waiver request will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, but moving forward, student athletes must meet one of the following criteria to be granted a waiver to compete immediately. A demonstrated physical injury or illness or mental health condition that necessitated the student's transfer, supporting documentation, care plans, and proximity of the student support system will be considered, or exigent circumstances that clearly necessitates a student athlete's immediate departure from the previous school, physical assault or sexual assault, unrelated to the student's athletics participation. Basically what they're saying here is if you enter the second time, you got to actually have a really good reason why. Another reason why I'm not so sure that this is going to take over everything is because there was one school that had the highest rated recruiting class of all time, and they basically just bought in a ton of dudes. They absolutely just spent through the wazoo for a great team, and they decided to go last in their division and tied for second last in the entire conference. And that would be your 2022 Texas A&M Aggies. Everybody remembers this. Okay, yeah, this is a bad example. No, it's not. It's a great example, okay? They spent $25 million on a recruiting class, brought in 25 of the best dudes in the country, and then they went 5-7. They lost 6 in a row at one point, and it was just, you can't do that. I think that, again, there's going to be teams that are mercenary teams, and there's going to be teams that are built teams. The teams that are built, I think, are going to be better than the mercenaries. You'll still be able to attract mercenaries. It will help you out, especially here and there, but you still have to build teams for the most part from the bottom up. You can't just go there and expect the transfer portal and NIL to save you. Maybe if you're a bigger school. This big school right here, greatest recruiting class of all time, didn't save them. I also think something else that is going to really address this whole situation is the CFP. So just for reference here, people need to understand that the FCS also has 128 programs here. So FBS had 131, now it's 133 or something like that. FCS has 128. And for them, they have a 24-team playoff. Now, the difference between that is most of these conferences here in this 24-team playoff do not have conference championships. So if you cut that in half to 12, what do you know, a 12-team playoff? I think that the way that they've written up the 12-team playoff rules are absolutely perfect. The 5 highest-rated conference champions get an automatic bid. The 4 highest-rated go to get a first-round bye. Again, if you're not in a conference, you can't get a first-round bye, Notre Dame. So the cool thing about that is that gives hope to Sun Belt, Conference USA, Mountain West, MAC, and then the American. Gives them hope because there's years that Western Michigan's the top team. Maybe the years that UCF's the top team. I know they're going to the Big 12 this next year. There's years that Boise State is the top team. Whoever that is, they have a potential to go up there because those collective, about 60 programs, have the ability to every once in a while develop a top team that can compete with those guys and go out there and play. So I don't mind that at all. I do like the fact, like I said, The FCS, 128 programs. Now the FCS, to be fair, the discrepancy between the top, grossing program there and the bottom is probably way closer than the FBS. But at the same time, I do think that this is going to alleviate some of that situation here. And my boy Tony Altmore, he had a really, really good idea here. And again, it's one of those things where you have to make sure that everybody is aligned in terms of, their goals. So you have to make sure that if it were ever to be a situation where it's a P2 breakaway, and again, when this is a P2 breakaway, not a Power 5, but an SEC and a Big 10 breakaway, here's what they would do. He says, if you're worried about a P2 breakaway, here's how to stop it very easy. The PAC, ACC, Ivy League, and UAA CEOs just say, if you do that, we won't hire your current staff or your new PhDs. We won't support publishing your papers, and we won't play you in any sports. We'd never hear about it again. And last but not least, my boy Mark Rogers. He's got the best idea in the world, something that we've needed for the longest time. Okay, the president right now is something you can do about that, but we really, really need somebody to do this situation right here. Check out what he says. Do you think college football will ever get a commissioner?
I think there needs to be a commissioner. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What would have to happen is that there would have to be cooperation between the Power 5 conferences for them to determine this is what's best for college football. And if they have enough vision forward, they would realize it's what's best for the SEC and the Big Ten even.
And it would be. Ultimately, it would be really good for them. Now, you have to make sure that you get them on board because unfortunately right now, okay, SEC and Big Ten are kind of in this battle, okay? If the ACC, those teams were available, we know they'd be pillaged right now at this point. There's just a lot of moving parts right there. But if ultimately you can make sure that you can, one, enforce your rules, okay? You can see the fact that you can't just buy championships. You see the fact that the CFP is expanding. You keep the national interest for college football alive because, again, if it just becomes, the LA, New York, DC, and all those teams, and everybody in the middle of the country, West, doesn't care, the sport would diminish in value. It would start to cost them money. If you did all of those things, also you got a commissioner out there who actually was able to hold these teams to account and get everybody on the same page, as opposed to be more like the UFC, as opposed to being like boxing where there's 5 different organizations and they don't all see eye to eye. The UFC, everybody's together. It's all the same. So those are my suggestions there. That's what I think is going to happen. I do ultimately think that the Power 5 and the Group of 5 will stay together just because there's too many things that are competing against them. A couple of them are hypothetical, like I said, in terms of the Tony Altmore's example of them basically just saying we won't hire any of your people. Also, the fact that, you keep the national, strength of the conference, you keep coast-to-coast interest. There's so many different teams out there. You have the Group of 5, which even if it is still Group of 5 right now, every once a year, that group of 60 teams can produce a top team that can compete with the rest of those other teams. So there's just too many reasons why it wouldn't all stick together here. But the future, we will know for sure. Anyways, get in the comments right now and let me know what you guys think about this whole situation. Do you think the Power 5 is going to continue to stay together? What do you think it will take to continue to get them to stay together? Do you think they'll break apart? Get in the comments right now and let me know. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much for being here. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Do all that stuff. I really appreciate it. That's it for me, guys. I'll see you guys later. I am out.